Hey everybody, it's day 18, the Via Magna. I have gone 18 miles today. Just took a little pit stop in the van, rest, eat some yogurt, some blueberries, some maple syrup, and get back on the road. Just want to share with you a few thoughts I've had this morning while I was running. I was thinking about the lines from a song from my brother's band, Smoke and the Poet. And one of the lyrics in this song was, "And the people, they won't understand that it takes a life to make one man." I was just thinking about how true that is. It takes a life to make one man. And how often we meet people at different sections of their little journey on earth, and it might be a bad section for them, might be a really rough section. And we meet them, and in that moment, we judge them, we put them in a little box, put that box in our closet, and shut the closet. And that's who they are. That's who they become. And we always think of them that in that way. Oh yeah, I met that guy 10 years ago in a bar. We talked for 5 minutes. He's an idiot. You don't think anything could have changed in 10 years. But our human tendency is to meet someone and we judge. We put a judgment on them. We put them in a box. And when you put someone in a box, they can't grow. They can't actually flourish and become the man or the woman God made them to be. And this used to happen to me a lot. I used to work at a boys' boarding school. And so often you're thinking about these guys and you're despairing over a certain kid because he's just not up to par where you think he should be in that moment. But he's 15, he's 14, he's 16, he's 18. You're expecting fruit on a tree before the season. We're expecting something before it's time. And it's an unrealistic thing to do. And it's so unfair. And it keeps people stuck in a seed form. And it prevents them from actually growing into the tree that they can be and fully flourishing. We have to give them time. So one of the things that made me think about, just to close this out, was the story of King David. King David's one of my favorite characters from the Old Testament. And King David's called a man after God's own heart. What a title. A man after God's own heart. But he was a man after God's own heart as a young man. When he's on the run, he's in the wilderness. He's being chased and pursued by King Saul while he, with his mighty men, is fighting off the enemies of Israel. But he's staying faithful to the Lord. He's suffering. He's on the run. He's in the wilderness. He's enduring hardship. But he's staying true to the course. But then when David comes into his kingdom and his material prosperity starts to sink in a little bit, we hear that one section of the scriptures where at that time of the year when kings go on campaign, David's waking up from a nap. He's having a little siesta in the afternoon. His army's out. He should be out there leading his army as a king. It's one of his duties, but he's not. He's at home taking a nap. Wakes up, walks out on his balcony, starts looking at Bathsheba, the first documented case of pornography. Then he commits adultery with her. And then he gets her husband Uriah killed to cover it up. What if we just took King David in that moment? What if that's all we knew? We met David in that moment and oh, that's King David. You put him in a little box right there. We don't look at everything that happened before that or how he reconciled, how he repented, and how he lived the rest of his life. We just take that one snapshot of David. He's not a man after God's own heart in that moment. But when you look at David's life as a whole, that is who he is. That is the man he was. And so often, we don't give people that time. We meet them at one moment in their life, and we look at them through the eyes of man. A good priest friend of mine says, you need to learn to look at your life through heaven's eyes. Learn to look at yourself through the eyes of God. Because oftentimes, we do that to ourselves. We put ourselves in that box. We take ourselves in our worst moments and our worst sins, we start to identify with that person in that moment, and we put ourselves in that box, and we keep ourselves from growing out of that. We put a block on God's grace and God's mercy because we've judged ourselves. The way God judges is not the way man judges. We need to look at ourselves and the people around us through the eyes of God and leave the judging to God. That's not one of the tasks of man, to be a judger. God is the best judge. Let's entrust ourselves to him. so we can actually grow and flourish and become the men that God made us to be. Because the people, they won't understand that it takes a life to make one man. Let's look at the big picture through the eyes of God. All right, thanks, guys.